OCI, Orange County Inspections, is glad to present the QC QA Professional Seminar, segment number 3. With this segment, we will review the following: the flowchart of any project, whether that is a small private site to a multi-million-dollar public facility. The flowchart will reveal the proper sequence of players in the game of the construction and the 3 rules that must be followed. Next, we take a look at one of the 3 rules that must be understood and followed to have an approved project. Those are the specifications. Here, we will learn how the specifications are put together, and we'll take a closer look at the items dealing with welding that are important to the QC QA professional. The first topic is the project flowchart. It doesn't matter if the project is private or public, small or huge, the flowchart is the same. And for the QC QA professional, you must understand this, or something as simple as getting clearance to just start work could cause a stop notice for the project. And remember, time is money. Whether you are a Republican or a Democrat, this holds true for every project. It takes someone or a group with money to build a project. So the key person here is the owner of the project. What is the old saying? The one with the gold makes the rules. Well, the owner has the money and will hire the team to build the project. Well, if you don't remember what I'm going to share with you right now, you might lose many hours of lost time with the project schedule. It is true, the one with the gold makes the rules, except for projects. The great neutralizer to any owner is the jurisdiction. Their main concern for any project is to approve and oversee the project. We will talk more about the jurisdiction's role later. Right now, let's look at the role of the owner. As we said earlier, without the owner and the money they bring to the table, there would be no projects. So, the role of the owner is to hire the team to design and build a project. First players are the design team. That would be the architect, who then hires the engineers. Their roles are to create a building with both structural and mechanical conforming aspects. Next, the owner will rely on the design professionals to hire the QA professionals. Here, this could cover from the state-appointed inspector to a third-party independent firm. Additionally to the design team, the owner will hire a general contractor. Their role is to issue and deal with contracts, approval, and much more. The big key for the general contractor is to hire the subcontractors to do the actual work on the project. Now let's take a look at the other side of the coin with any project, and that's the jurisdiction role. Now we'll look at the role of the jurisdiction. This is the part of the process of any project that is more misunderstood than any other. And if you find yourself in this situation, just email us here at OCI and we can help. The jurisdiction can be a complicated animal because they can be a federal or state agency, an affiliation with a county or city, and even at times a homeowner association. Now, it doesn't matter who they are, they provide the same role, which is to approve drawings, change orders, personnel, etc., and oversee the daily production of work and personnel for conformance with the approved drawings and codes. The rules. Whether you are the engineer or the building official, there are 3 rules that the team must follow to complete the project, and those are the approved specifications, the applicable building codes, and the approved drawings. Let's take a closer look at the first one, specifications. Before we take a closer look at the first rule, we need to understand the definition of what QC or QA professional duties are. So as we see them mentioned, you will not confuse the job descriptions. So, what is the difference between QC and QA professional? Quality control, QC, includes those functions to be performed by the contractor to ensure that the material and workmanship of the construction meet the quality requirements. And quality assurance, QA, consists of those inspection services to be performed by an agency or firm other than the contractor. The QA professional is provided at the choice of the owner and may be mandated by the building code. The first rule any project must comply with are the approved specifications, also known as specs. So then, what are approved specifications? They are a specific set of requirements to be satisfied by material, product, or service which has been approved by both the professional design team, aka architect and engineer, and jurisdiction having authority. So now we'll take a closer look at how to use the specifications and some key divisions and sections found in those specifications for the QC/QA professional. The first part of the specification we will look at is the table of contents. Top right corner states what we are looking at. Next is the page number. Here we see a special call out for bidding requirements. Now we see the beginning of the specifications. Then we see the first division, general requirements. With this project, there are 16 different divisions that cover every aspect found used on the project, from general requirements to electrical. Okay, we see the sections that are found in every division. These sections break down the material, product, or service required for this project. And lastly, we view the title and page numbers for the different sections found in this division. Let's look at the second page of the table of contents. Here we see the title of the page, Table of Contents, then the table of contents page number. See the division callouts. Division 2 is site work, Division 3 is concrete, Division 4 is masonry, etc. Here are the sections of the divisions for metals, with the topic, titles, and page numbers. So you have seen the different parts of this table of contents, so now we will look at a few different sections that you as a QC/QA professional should be aware of. First section we will review is 1450 Quality Control. This is a summary of the related sections for both the QC and QA professionals, and also it covers other personnel that can be the QA professional. Here we take a look at the contractor's quality control, or the duties of the QC professional. In A, we see where it's the contractor's responsibility to ensure that the product, service, workmanship, and site condition comply with the drawings and specifications. Now in B, we see the work shall be in accordance with codes, laws, rules, regulations, and standards. Then finally in C, we see it's the contractor's responsibility to provide skilled personnel to ensure that the work is provided as required. We now move to see the duties of the QA professional of this project, and we'll see the different authorities that are also the QA personnel. Here is the requirements for inspection and test established by governing authorities. First, all testing and inspection must comply with the Uniform Building Code and California Building Code, plus all other governing jurisdictions. The authorities having jurisdiction for this project include Office of Statewide Health Planning Development, OSHPD, Public Works Department, and the Fire Department. Next we see the QA professional can be from a servicing utility jurisdiction, and the QA professional can even be a manufacturer representative if additional inspection and testing is required. Lastly, we are more familiar with this statement on how an independent testing agency is also a QA professional. To finish this section, let's review a few key notes that will help both the QC and QA professionals as they work together on a project. Here are some contractors' responsibilities for inspection and testing. There should be a 24-hour notice for conducting inspection and testing. There should be cooperation between personnel and access provided to work area, plus additional labor for obtaining samples and at least a 15-day advance notice prior to first scheduling test or inspection. Now we have seen in this section for quality control the duties for both the QC and QA professionals. They both have similar jobs, which is to make sure the work complies to codes, drawings, and specifications, while working together when and if problems do arise in a professional way. We now look at section 1455, Structural Tests and Inspections. This section is very important not only to the QA professional but also the QC. Why, you may ask? Well, we see the requirements of notification for testing of materials or product prior to fabrication, manufacture, or installation, plus sufficient notice of delivery so materials can be tested. And I ask you, who must do this? You got it, the QC professional. Here we see where a lot of the guesswork is taken out for the QC and QA professionals. This is a clear table of contents spelling out the code sections for the different required divisions of work on this project. If you need to know what the code says about material identification for steel, you would find that information in the California Building Code 2202A.2. Now in California we have a government appointed division that oversees the building and retrofit of hospitals. This government division is called Office of Statewide Health Planning Department, OSHPD. When we review this section, we see the requirements that the test and inspection will follow. The key thing to understand is that the QC and QA professional have a higher source of inspection above them. That person is the Inspector of Record, IOR, who is certified by the state of California to have access to all work on that project under which the permit is approved for. So the QA professional works for the Inspector of Record, IOR, who maintains daily reported observation for the constructing of materials by the QC professional firm. With this section, we have touched upon only a few items that both the QC and QA professionals need to understand and follow to keep compliance with the project requirements. Okay, with this seminar, we will spend some time looking at the welding division for the QC and QA professionals. So with that, here is section 5120, structural steel. The first thing to notice is the related sections and their specific section callouts. The second item is the references that must be used for this project. We see the building code edition is the 2001. And when you don't have an edition called out, as with the D11, you will use the latest edition available. You might not be familiar with this document, the FEMA 350. This is a federal government standard for structural moment frame buildings. If you need help finding this document, just drop us an email at orangecountyiinspections@yahoo.com and we will help you. As we move to the next page, we see a few more important items that are missed a lot. First is having welding procedures for both welder and procedure, plus mill tests by a third party prior to fabrication. We will go further into each one of these later in the seminar. The second item is the list of materials required for this project. What is the grade required for steel pipe? Well, that is grade B. Moving on to the next important item is the information required for fasteners. These will be the bolts either soft A307 or high tension A325. There will be a segment that will cover fasteners later in the seminar. It will reveal much needed information to help the QC and QA professional. To alert you, here is the requirements for headed studs. Notice how Type C steel is required. Now we move to material testing. See how the specification can and will call for another type of requirements to be followed. As for here, it must conform to ASTM A6. Before we finish with this section, there are a few items that will be found in this section that might not make sense at times. One is the anchor bolts for the columns. You might think the information should be in the concrete section, and also is the dry packing of bases and plates. To finish with structural steel sections is the third-party inspection and testing agencies, who is the QA professional. Notice how it refers you to another section that we have already reviewed. Also notice how the welding inspector not only has to be qualified but also approved by OSHPD for this project. As we close with the structural steel section in these specifications, we could spend many hours looking at important items to both the QC and QA professionals. But we try to show the major items that will get you studying the section with a better understanding of the duties of each party. We now move into section 5121, welding. Here we see how this section covers welding for both the shop and field. And if you remember how in the table of contents for code additions we reviewed earlier, the AWS D11 didn't have an addition called out, and we see here the architect wants you to use the latest edition available. Then notice this very important part, the amendments to the D11 code used. These four items will override the requirements of the D11 for this project only. Next is the submittal requirements for the welding procedure specifications, WPS. We will go over not only the WPSs more in detail later in this seminar, but also the required qualification record, PQR. As we move on in this section, we see further information for the QA professional. First is dealing with the standards that are required to be used. And second is the qualification of the welder. Now we see another section for both the QC and QA professionals. Here we see another FEMA publication being called out in specific chapters. We close with this section for welding, and you see how the duties of both the QC and QA professionals are very similar, but are performed at different times of the installation. Let's review the next section, which is 5300 metal decking. Here is a summary of what is actually covered by the decking required for this project. Then we see related sections that will work with this section also. And guess what? Here is the QA section covering the decking. Surprised? And a term you will hear a lot is continuous inspection. And if you don't know what that means for this project, well, just follow the trails these specifications provide. On this page, we see the sections for delivery, storage, and handling, product materials, fabrication, and execution. So for metal decking, you can see how many items that need to be followed, or the project takes a chance in becoming a non-conforming status, which could waste time, which is money. The last section we will review is section 5400, cold formed metal framing, or as you might know them, light gauge metal studs. Okay, we start with understanding what this section is all about, and that is here in the summary. Next, we see a definition of this section, and this is nice because you want to make sure you are using the right section for the application being used on the project. Notice the reference being called out. We move on to the second page, and let's point out a few items for the QA professional. First is the qualification requirements of the testing agency. Second is the product test required prior to start of the installation. Third is the requirement of material to be the same that was tested for fire resistance. Fourth is slightly different. There is another specification and standard that the material must comply with. Same here again about another standard to comply with. Sixth item is the welder operator qualifications must comply with AWS D1.3 code. Now we'd like to point out an interesting item here in part 3, execution of page 5. In the preparation section, notice that any connecting clips, like a Z-clip, is okay to be welded to the beam prior to fireproofing being applied, but all fireproofing must be completed prior to any installation of the framed system. And finally, we come across the field quality control. First, we see the owner will engage in providing the independent testing and inspection agency. Second, we see both field and shop welds are subject to testing and inspections. Next, the testing results are turned in promptly to both the contractor and architect. Fourth is how material will be removed and corrected if testing doesn't comply with specified requirements. And to follow with what we just read, the cost will be passed on to the contractor for additional testing and inspection. We have completed segment 3. I'd like to review of the topics we have covered. We first saw the flow chart, and by reviewing the flow chart we came in familiar with the players and the 3 rules. We then studied the first rule, which was the specifications, and now we'd like you to take the study material and complete the questions that have been provided for you. If you have any questions, email us here at OCI by dropping us an email at orangecountyiinspections@yahoo.com, and when completed, move to segment number 4.